Tensions between the United States, Israel and Iran have escalated sharply after recent strikes and counter-strikes in the Middle East, sending shockwaves through global markets and international travel routes. These developments are already starting to affect Nigeria's economy, currency, and ordinary travelers. And analysts say the conflict, especially fears of major supply disruption through the Strait of Hormuz, a key oil transit route, has pushed global crude prices higher, creating both potential opportunities and risks for Nigeria's oil-dependent economy. While higher oil prices could boost revenue and foreign exchange inflows, they also risk fueling inflation and exchange rate volatility if the situation drags on.
But the impact isn't just on markets. Air travel across the Middle East and beyond has ground to a halt, with many countries shutting their airspace for safety. As a result, Nigerian passengers flying to and from destinations like Qatar, the UAE, Iraq and Israel have found themselves stranded or stuck amid mass flight cancellations. Carriers including Qatar Airways, Emirates, Turkish Airline and others have suspended flights as regional airspace restrictions remain in place, leaving would-be travelers searching for alternative routes or waiting for new schedules. To help us make sense of all of this and how this geopolitical conflagration is intersecting with Nigeria's economy and the everyday lives of citizens, we're joined by Regional Coordinator, Central Africa Institute for Security Studies. Dr. Wole Ojewale joins us this morning. Thank you for being here all the way from Dakar.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so what triggered this latest US-Iran escalation? I mean, we've read it everywhere. There's been explainers. News Central has taken time to also put out some reports out there inundating Nigerians on what will happen and what could happen next. But how serious is this current situation?
Thank you so much for having me again. I think as it has been highlighted in the intro, this is a very serious crisis at hand. And coupled with the fact that there are very strategic supply chain implications for Nigeria. And not only that, it's also for volatile issues in Nigeria, which I believe we are all familiar with, which has to do with religious affiliation and orientation, or some sects in Nigeria who also pledge allegiance to theocratic government in Iran, which I believe the state authorities are trying to also respond to. So when you put all this together, we realize that it's not only for economic implication for Nigeria and the globe. Nigeria sits at a very strategic spot in terms of this religious conflagration that often rear its ugly head and can add a new layer to the crisis that we have in Nigeria, which I believe have a very serious implication. So looking in the comprehensive sense, this is something that is very, very serious and strategic, and that every country, like you have mentioned in your intro, has a sense of urgency to really respond to.
Now, Dr. Ojewale, I mean, we saw this play out over the weekend. The Israelis framed it as a preventative or preemptive strike against the government in Tehran, and the Iranians have responded, you know, bombing Israel and a few other GCC countries. Do you see this this escalation extending? Are we looking at a protracted conflict? And we saw what happened in Nigeria. The economy slowed down. The world supply chain economy and the implications of the Russia-Ukraine war in its early days. Do you think we'll be heading towards that, or this will be a quick operation?
I think the starting point is to highlight the fact that this has always been a frozen conflict and a perpetual one, that it is only when things resort to missile strikes that probably the whole world feel the impact. Are you with me?
Yes, with you.
Okay, so in this sense now, we find a situation in which for the past 3 days, things have really become convoluted And, this dates back to many, many years since the Obama years, the negotiation around the Iran nuclear deal, and then some spikes that have happened since then. So I believe, knowing fully well, that an ideological issue cannot be resolved based on the firing of missiles from both ends. What is going to probably put this to maybe I should just say maybe a pause or a stop now is going to be a diplomatic solution. So the reverberation in terms of social disruption, economic disruption, I think that is where lies the answer. But to think the overarching objective of regime change in Iran is suddenly going to turn things around, I do not subscribe to that idea in any way. Judging from a sense of history, I believe to the extent to which both forces are able to maybe embrace ceasefire and go back to the table is what can put a pause to that disruption now.
Sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Ojewale. When you say going back to the table, they were at the table, they were negotiating. The foreign minister of Oman said Iran had already agreed to not enriching uranium and met some of the terms, and then this attack happened. Also, if you remember the operations last year when Israel struck Iran, they were in the middle of conversations in Qatar, and the Israelis tried to assassinate the negotiations. So you say this conflict has been frozen, and will it, with everything we're witnessing now and the breach of trust, will it be possible to actually go back to that table and speak? Because it seems the missiles are doing the talking now.
So this kind of convolution, all options will be on the table. And, considering the sophistication of the actors in the theater now, I believe they have much more sophisticated information and intelligence in terms of what is going on. Don't forget that there was a bombing of some sites in Iran, and then after that we find ourselves to the point that deployment has been made now. Yes, I read that account by the Oman minister, foreign minister, but I believe so strongly that they've put all options on the table. While we talk about enriching of uranium capacity, President Trump did not shy away from the fact that he wants Iranians to take over their government, and that is regime change. And you realize that within the 24 hours of firing of missiles, that has already been achieved. So I believe there is more to the enrichment of the uranium in terms of what the allied forces of Israel and the US wanted to achieve in Iran. And they have staked that, as we have seen now. So I believe perhaps the strike was also to force the hand of Iran to go back to the table and make some far-reaching concessions. So it is against that backdrop that I made a statement that all conflicts, on a final analysis, are resolved on the table of diplomacy and negotiation, and I think that is what is going to help to facilitate the return of peace to that region now.
All right. There are a number of questions that come to my head, but let me start with the January protests in Iran. We did see earlier where President Trump had said that help was coming, and many have interpreted what has happened to be help having come to Iran. He calls this operation Epic Fury and has called for Iranians to take over their government. Now, the question is, yes, you talked about, a transition in government. Are there concerns that what happened in Venezuela will be repeated here in Iran? Are the people of Iran going to then be encouraged to, take over things for themselves, by themselves? Because we've seen two sides of the argument. Those who argue that their sovereignty has been interrupted and disrespected, and others who say that this is help. We've seen some Iranians celebrating and jubilating as well. So how do you foresee that this will play out? And do you worry about reprisal attacks as a result of the killing of the Ayatollah?
I worry about so many things. I worry for Nigeria, I worry for Africa, because I believe so strongly that if Iran war comes on top of what we're already battling with, our own conflict on the continent are probably going to relegate it again back to the back burner. And then to the substantial question that you asked, I believe what happened in Venezuela is now a child's play to what has happened in Iran now. So the supreme leader was eliminated within 24 hours. Maduro was only abducted or whatever they call it. And then where we are now in terms of what I think is going to happen next in terms of what are my worries and concerns, I believe so strongly that yes, we've seen people that are protesting, some people are jubilating, and then anybody who also watched the video or the images that were being circulated on the internet yesterday in terms of the number, the millions of followers that actually step out to mourn the death of Khamenei shows that the ideological wedge that the regime has over Iran is far-reaching than maybe the people that are actually protesting outside there. And if history is anything to guide us in any way, there was a regime change in Afghanistan, and 20 years after over $1 trillion has been spent, Taliban were back in power. The Iraq war actually was the albatross that that really frustrated the government of George Bush. And I think if you are guided by those two developments, this is not probably going to yield a very different result from what we have seen in the past. And that is the reason why I think a lot of people have been calling for caution. Consider the pivotal positioning of Iran rather, to global supply chain and some serious ramification that this is going to have, which is a lot of people also didn't envisage that this is going to strategically affect the travel industry, which has been disrupted in the last 24, 48 hours now. So I believe a lot of people think probably this is going to be a walkover, but event of the last 48 hours raise serious concern in terms of what are going to be the potential consequences if this continues to drag on.
Okay, I'd like us to bring it back home, because the conversation concerning what just happened, of course, we could say is very huge. We could see it affecting different parts, different countries, the global economy outlook, especially when it comes to oil and gas, buying, prices, name it. But here in Nigeria, I know you are in Dakar, so we might as well just tag it as Africa. What should Africa expect to feel, either as a form of what happened, and will it affect Africa's economy either for the better, or will Africa need to find another means to ensure that whatever happened in the global stage will not in any way affect the continent, especially from the African Union aspect?
No, we can only minimize the risk. Nobody is isolated. Nobody is insulated against what is happening and what is going to happen next. For instance, Nigeria, that is an oil-producing country, you know, we are going to, it's going to be a double-edged sword in a way. Yes, yeah, I think yesterday report shows that the price of oil has jumped from $73 to $80. I'm seeing some reports this morning that are also showing that things might be tilting towards $100 per barrel. That means maybe much is going to be coming into the coffer of Nigeria. But, you know, Nigeria, like any other, most African countries, are import-dependent countries. So if the supply chain is affected, if the price of oil goes up, then it's about what you get from the right goes away through the left hand again. So I think the critical areas that this can affect us, which it has always been, whether it is from COVID-19 to all other disruptions that have happened, is that African countries suddenly realize how much they are reliant, how much they have built their system around the global supply chain. And they begin, and for instance, if you look at the area of food security, where you talk about the dependence on wheat supply from Ukraine and all those things. And in the midst of crisis, they suddenly realize that they need to decouple. And immediately the crisis passes away, even if it lasts for 2-3 years, like the COVID-19, they then suddenly go back to the old normal. So I don't see the preparedness on the part of Africa. African countries are going to be seriously hit. The price of oil might we go up, particularly for countries that are not oil producing, and Nigeria that is also oil producing and dependent on various importations that are coming into the country. So I believe nobody has prepared for this, even though the previous crisis taught us some lessons. And we are just going to go through it as we have always been going through it as usual. Nigeria has a bit of an edge now because of the Dangote refinery. But you know what? Everything also had to everything, like I mentioned originally. Dangote is also not sourcing the oil from Nigeria. I'm talking about the crude. And if the supply chain is disrupted in any way, the cost is going to be passed to the final consumers. Insurance companies, I'm talking about maritime insurance companies are already complaining if the Strait of Hormuz is affected and things become strained. Those costs are going to be passed to the end users in Africa. We are not insulated in any way, and we have never really demonstrated the resilience to prepare for crisis.
Now, Dr. Ojewale, let's look at where Nigeria sits. Nationhood right now, we're in a very precarious situation with the level of insecurity we're witnessing. And also the partnership, military partnership deal with the United States. Because over the weekend, nobody expected. The Iranians have said they will do it, and they carried out their threats. We saw Manama in Bahrain, the US Sixth Fleet was hit, residential buildings in hotels in Dubai. We also saw attacks on Qatar. These are Gulf GCC countries, allies of the United States, Al Hudaid in Qatar. These are countries that host United States military bases, and Iran said, as a result of that, they are fair game. Because of this recent partnership with the United States, the talks of Nigeria possibly hosting a U.S. refueling base, and we've seen very good relationships with the Tinubu administration and the Trump presidency. Should we be wary of such, knowing that the Americans might be very interested in having a base, perhaps, of some sort, following the loss of their drone bases in Niger?
Well, I think that is a very, very delicate issue in Nigeria now. But, a man that is flat on the ground and is challenged by certain afflictions, if he's taken to the operation theater, has very limited input in terms of what the doctors are going to do. I think that illustrates the situation in Nigeria now. We've moved from we're going to come to fire Tomahawk missiles to now changing that narrative to a cooperative one. And I have seen a very serious pushback from the section of the country who are insisting that the American drone refueling base cannot be situated in Nigeria. I think I foresee a compromise, really, because judging by some media reports that have been we've been seeing, I think there's been a strategic shift in terms of the counter-terrorism operation as a result of the cooperation that Nigeria has forged with the U.S. in the recent time. And don't forget that this goes beyond really military partnership. You are looking at other areas of compromises and concessions that both countries are going to be eating at. Nigeria is already designated as a country of concern. Nigeria wants to do everything to get the country off that list, and that point in the direction of the concessions that I said are probably going to be made. What I see on the long run is that why the extreme northern part of the country, that constituency, might not want to have that military base here. I foresee that such a refueling base might probably be placed somewhere around north central or southwest. I think that is probably going to be part of the concession that Nigeria is going to make. Perhaps just to ensure that it not only serve American strategic interest, but it also advance Nigeria's security interest.
All right, so I have a twofold question. Again, bringing it back to how it impacts Nigerians at home and abroad. You did mention earlier that Nigeria has a slightly better advantage as a result of the Dangote refinery, but we know that a lot of decisions are based on the price of oil. Our budget is oftentimes, drawn based on that. So what necessary precautions should be taken? Because you did mention, of course, that yes, Dangote refinery is an edge, but it's not completely exempt from the repercussion that this might have on us as a nation. So what necessary precautions should we take as a nation in terms of our budgeting? What precautions can businesses and individuals take? And for Nigerians in the diaspora, what do they need to do at this moment? Those especially in like Doha, Dubai, you know, in all these places where they are having to face the collateral effect of what's happened between Israel, US, and Iran.
One, it saddens the heart that why the Dangote refineries should be a game changer. I'm personally appalled that Dangote needs to be sourcing for the crude outside Nigeria, even though we see it on a very serious deposit of oil. So I will expect that previous conversation around crude for Naira, all those policies that the government had with Dangote are actually seen to be implemented fully, that Dangote can first source the crude from Nigeria, refine in Nigeria, and prioritize Nigeria as the first supply destination for the consumption of those oil. Those are the areas which I think we really need to strengthen now to at least edge Nigeria against the possible consequences of these lingering crises. And to the other Nigerians that are already in the diaspora who have been caught up in this, I think they just have to abide by travel advisories. And I do hope that Nigerian embassies in those countries are on top of the game now, ensuring that the lives and the properties of Nigeria in those places that are becoming the proxies for this Iran conflict are actually addressed, and people are not left alone to really sort themselves out in a land in which they do not really understand what happens next. So I think the responsibility falls on the Nigerian Foreign Affairs Ministry, the embassies and consulate in those countries to ensure that the lives of our people are safe, and as much as they can really repatriate them, they provide that support now. Nigeria has huge presence in some of those countries, particularly the UAE, Qatar, and a few of them. So I expect that to take place on the part of the Foreign Affairs Ministry to really swing into action.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Wole Ojewale, Regional Coordinator, Central African Institute for Security Studies, joining us live from Dhaka this morning. We do appreciate your insights on this important topic. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.